Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dawn of Yangchen chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 35, which is called Clarity. And the way to interpret that title with this chapter is basically that this is Kavik, his sort of like in a way counter-betrayal. This is him playing the other side here. He has done what Kalyan told him to do, which was to basically escort the Unanimity to Bin That is the thing that it means that Kalyan has fulfilled his duty to Honshu. So Kalyan should be safe, Honshu should be safe, he has the weapon, so that's fine. Now, Kavik has fulfilled his part of that sort of deal, guilt trip, whatever way you want to call it. And Kavik is sort of free to actually be like, okay, I need to bring Yangchen in because the weapon probably will cause problems. And as we see in this chapter, Kavik witnesses Unanimity in action and realizes that this is a crazy serious situation. But this is an interesting one where they start to mess around with sort of stuff that has happened off screen already, and a little bit vague with sort of how much time passes between specific parts of certain chapters. So this one can be a little bit tricky to understand just reading through it the first time. Basically what you have to think about in this chapter is that Kavik has, prior to or even arriving on Bin put a little bit of a plan into action to get Yangchen back to Bin quicker than you would have expected. That he hasn't just been sort of like in a way drowning in self-pity over how weak he was. No, before the ship even left Jondari, he put a little bit of a plan in place, and he puts another part of his plan in place to get Yangchen back here, like early on in this chapter. And we sort of see that come to fruition here. So let's go through this and try and explain it as best we can. So immediately we get the idea that in Bin things are bad. The riots have picked up. They've become kind of like they are in Jondari. Of course, there's people on strike, people, just crowding areas, riots are happening, complete chaos. There's no stability in Bin anymore. Honshu has lost control. He cannot get that control back in any way except what he feels like he has to do, which is to use Unanimity. So it's just noted here, we've had this a few times now. It gets trickier and trickier and trickier to just get through Bin through the international district. It was difficult at the start, it's even more difficult now, and it's dangerous as well. A big thing we learned early on here is that everyone has suspicions that Earth King Feishan is going to step in soon, and there were reports that troops are marching towards Bin So in just a few days, the Earth King is going to step in. And that's the thing Honshu wanted to avoid as much as possible. This is why he's sort of activating his plan now. He wants to have Unanimity in place to halt the Earth Kingdom forces and stabilize the city. So you can sort of see like, okay, he's effectively almost, putting up the walls of his fortress around Bin here. And those walls are effectively combustion blasts from 3 combustion benders. Is that enough to hold off what's coming against him? Is this a clever plan? You are still thinking that, I'm not sure if this is it. But we do eventually get the idea that, as far as Kavik was concerned, he'd done what his brother had asked. The Avatar had been sent off to Port Tugok, oblivious to his betrayal, and she'd missed the crucial shipment. Honshu had gotten his due and had no further reason to threaten Kalyan. Great. Unanimity had slipped past them and was in Bin under Honshu's control. Kalyan had told him he could play both sides. All was not lost yet. He had to find a messenger hawk fast. So this is the second stage. Again, there's something that's happened in the past, which we'll get to at the end of the chapter. But this is the second thing that he wants to do to get in touch with Yangchen. So he goes to Boma. And again, we explain that previously, sort of off screen, Yangchen did introduce Kavik to Boma. So they are familiar with each other. They know what's going on with each other. He goes to Boma and is like, can you send a messenger hawk for me? And that's effectively what happens here. Again, it's the idea he trusts Kavik, and it's another one of those moments of like, you shouldn't trust me because of what I just did, but you have to do it here. Now, he doesn't tell Boma that like he betrayed Yangchen. He just presents the situation that I think the information to send Yangchen to Port Tugok might be wrong now. We need to get her back here as soon as possible, and he assists Kavik with this. So Messenger Hawk is going to be sent to Port Tugok to try and get Yangchen back as soon as possible. And there's the tease here that, of course, Boma doesn't even check the message. So Kavik effectively admits the truth in this letter to Yangchen to try and get her back here as soon as possible. So we know she is currently in Port Tugok, but by the time the Hawk gets there, will she still be there? Because we don't really know exactly what Yangchen is thinking after the last Yangchen and a Unarak chapter. Is she going to immediately head back to Jondari or not? And that's what's sort of like discussed here a little bit of like, what if she already left? What if she went back to Jondari? We won't be able to get word to her by aerial message. It's why I couldn't tell any of you how bad the situation in Bin Ur was. She could be stuck on the island waiting for an update that'll never come. And Kavik says she won't linger in Jondari. If she goes back there, she'll come straight here after without delay. I guarantee it. Trust me again. So that will get explained a little bit later on in the chapter. But okay, the messenger hawk gets sent off. And we just see that like some time passes at this point, and things overall are safe for Kavik because he's there, just staying at the inn and so on. He can't bring himself to go back to his parents, I suppose, just because what if he says something about how he betrayed Yangchen? He'd have to talk to them about Kalyan. It could get very just awkward, and he doesn't know what to do with all of this. He has to focus on what to do next. So we see that he is kind of struggling. He feels helpless in the situation, and he decides to go to the one person he feels could help him in the situation, which is Mama Unarak. But he obviously arrives there, finds that she's gone. And of course the reason she's gone is effectively because you told me to go. So Unarak is gone. We know where she is. She's down south with Yangchen. But this sort of in a way causes Kavik to break down of just like this lack of stability in this situation. He kind of goes down behind Unarak's kind of building. His feet had carried him out of habit. He began to cry, haltingly and without tears, as if part of him still had to be uncommitted, even in his deepest despair. He whispered a hoarse request to the sky for any kind of relief. And what he gets is the first combustion blast. The first explosion goes off at this point. So this is the unanimity being used for the first time. And that is to bring stability to Bin Ur by basically rounding up the crowds. Hansha is not killing people. The blasts are more or less being aimed just into the air or into the ground where people are not around. So the idea is that I guess some people are getting injured from like falling over and like pressure kind of blasts, but no one is being blown up here in this situation. He's not trying to kill everyone and blatantly just commit super crazy crimes here. It's still a city he ultimately wants to rule over, and he sort of needs the people. So that's what's happening here. So Kavik, kind of gets back to his senses, and this is where he gets to, I suppose, fully experience a combustion blast for the first time. He hears the pop pop, and then the slight pause, and then the explosion happens. And that's the thing that 100% confirms to you it's a combustion blast, because that signature pop, pop, pause, explosion is the combustion bending sound effect. He saw it fully this time, an expansion of light with the suddenness of a noisemaker, but instead of a cloud of colourful pinpricks, it was a solid sphere of angry pressure, a ball of fire in the sky. Dust and debris rippled outwards along the street, and he shielded his eyes before he was blown backwards by a wave of air as powerful as any he'd seen the Avatar produce. And throughout all this, he's sort of thinking about what Kalyan said to him, which was basically, join my side, you owe me something. But he was also sort of saying the idea of like, nothing bad's going to happen with the weapon. He's just going to use it to sort of complete his control in Bin Nothing really bad's going to happen. And so nothing bad will happen if the Avatar doesn't get her way. We'll be fine. I'm your brother. I would never let anything bad happen. Don't worry about it. But what Kavik is seeing is things beginning to go wrong. This is not what he thought would happen with all of this. Kavik still couldn't hear the cries of people running through the street, but he could hear Kalyon's voice telling him before he left not to worry. So the Unanimity is stabilizing Bin but Kavik ultimately realizes they need Yangchen here to stop this. That's the only thing that can actually be done in all of this. So, the damage was getting systematically spread over the city. So they're making sure to just show, I suppose, that they can hit everywhere in the city. To just scare everyone into complete submission overall. And the main thing Kavik takes away from this is that as good of a liar as Kavik was, he would only ever be second best in his family. So the idea seems to be that Kalyan realistically knew the extent of the weapon and that he lied to Kavik about how it would be used. And this is another thing of another reason not to trust his brother anymore. So Kavik makes the decision to go back to his family here. He's very worried about them in this situation. He arrives back at the house. They're huddled up in the corner, trying to stay away from the door as much as possible because that's probably where we'll be targeted. And they're like, where's the Avatar? Why isn't she here? And the only thing he can say is just that she'll be here soon. She'll fix this. Have faith. This leads to the final section of the chapter where we sort of see that faith kind of in a way come through. But in between the end of the last paragraph and this one, it's clear that at least a day or two has passed. It's not super clear, but based on stuff that happens later on in the book and how they reflect on things, the idea seems to be that it's 2, 3, maybe 4 days at the absolute most. Just enough that the residents of Bin are terrified that there is now a little bit of a regular schedule for how you do things. At nighttime, you don't put any lights up, otherwise they might be targeted. They know what not to do in every situation. So, nor could anyone sleep through the noise, which sometimes arrived in walking barrages that crept closer and closer, descending, stalking, until Kavik was certain the final strikes would come crashing through his roof. So it's true, terrorizing everyone here, keeping them up, and just, within a short span, it seemed like the whole of Bin had been beaten into submission. The residents of the city were being punished by forces beyond their comprehension. Hansha had secured his version of stability. And Kavik wonders, how does this ability work? Because he's figured out most of it, but he doesn't fundamentally understand, I suppose, how combustion bending works. All he knows is that clearly the 3 people who make up Unanimity are firebenders. They are the ones doing this. He knows that there's a pop, pop, boom. They create explosions. It's incredibly powerful. But he's not really clear what's going on as such. And it's important that he's thinking about that because Kavik is going to eventually go to sort of investigate this. He has revealed that he's actually quite good at the errand running type stuff. And he is going to eventually go to effectively spy on the 3 members of Unanimity to give Yangchen whatever information and advantage that he can. That's the one thing that he can do in all of this time. Now, that's a little bit more information that's presented in the chapter, but again, I think it helps to just know that while they skip over a couple of days here, they do sort of establish that later on that Kavik leaves the house a few times, and that's to do the kind of tailing, basically. Dazed by a lack of sleep, he lost track of how long it had been since he returned to Bin So, again, getting across, a decent amount of time has passed, but not super, super long. It's still been a few days. Basically just enough that when we get into the proper action coming up, the Earth King's forces are here, and Yangchen has arrived back. that's the way you can get a sense for, like, I suppose, how long it is actually taken. There's a knock at the door. His parents' house, of course, that's where they are. And it's Jujenta in Bin-Er. So again, keeping the map in place here. Jujenta, before now, has only been in Jondari. He has now arrived in Bin-Er. How has he made his way here? What's going on? How does he know where Kavik lives? Why is he here? Lots of questions here. But it's very, very noticeable here. So, with great care, Jujenta reached into his collar and pulled out the bison whistle Kavik had given to him before leaving Jondari, along with instructions to use it when he meditated alone or made offerings to the spirits at shrines by himself. You were right, he said, placing it back into Kavik's hands. The answer came to me. So that's an important detail there. That is Kavik's plan that he put into place before he boarded the ship with Unanimity. So it's highlighting that he did a little bit of something to try and bring Yangchen back into the game earlier than you expected him to, and actually utilizing Jujenta, who he is sort of highlighted as someone he saw potential in, and it's worked out well for him here. So Yangchen had obviously given him a bison whistle before, just before that he went into his big attack on the warehouse mission, and he has now given the bison whistle to Jujenta, with the idea being that just because of what Kavik has been asked to do, he can't stick around to do anything. And also in Jondari, he couldn't possibly have communicated with Yangchen, otherwise Chaisi would have found out something about it. So to be as secretive as possible, passes on this information to Jujenta, who I suppose isn't potentially being monitored as much, and Kavik is aware that Jujenta wants forgiveness from basically the spirits, his dead brother. One of those things isn't going to happen. The spirits are all over the place. You never know what's going to happen. Or Kavik basically makes the idea that I have a feeling I have a feeling him meeting the Avatar might be something that might be good for him. And it turns out that that is the case. He was a changed man. Before, when they'd spoken, Jujenta's eyes had always been slightly vacant and dull, as if part of him were trapped in another place and time. But now he was fully present. He shone with inner purpose. Meeting the Avatar face to face could do that to a person. And yeah, the fact that he was at Kavik's door with a whistle said the rest. The message to Yangchen had been successfully passed on. The Avatar was in Bin-Er. So this was his way of like, okay, if Yangchen arrives back on Jondari, Jujenta is going to be constantly, basically using the whistle at the shrine, following Kavik's orders, and that will get Jujenta into contact with Yangchen. If she stays in Port Tugok, that's where the messenger hawk was going to come into play. So this basically reveals to us that the messenger hawk was a last kind of minute thing. It missed. That whatever way they met, it was Yangchen meeting Jujenta. So that's an interesting kind of dynamic here. But again, it confirms to us, time has passed. Yangchen is now here in the city. So this is the setup. This is the end of the chapter for, I would say the next chapter is probably one of the more notable ones in the entire book. It's the most depth we get about the whole explaining the combustion bending stuff in this book. But it also is interesting because it is the start of the end of the book. There's not that many chapters left. There's only about 40 pages left in the book. And it is surprising in a way. We have just started, but we also have to quickly end it here. And we'll discuss that as we go through, about like, is that the right thing to do? Was it too quick? Was it too rushed? But I like the setup here in this chapter of like learning that Kavik, as early as he possibly could, it feels like Kavik did try to almost like immediately make amends, bring Yangchen back up to speed. It doesn't fully make amends for the fact that he ultimately sent her to the complete opposite side of the world, and the misinformation has maybe, meant she won't make it like in time before something like irreparable happens. But he has done what he can to bring her back into play as soon as possible. Clever moves, nice use of Jujenta, of course. I like the idea that we at least address, even if it's just a little bit, that Kavik and Boma do actually know each other in all of this, and that, hey, Boma, we haven't seen him in a while. Here he is actually helping out with something. And just kind of Kavik dealing with his kind of guilt, seeing that following Kalyan has led to him, in a way, feeling somewhat responsible for allowing this to happen to the city, these explosions beginning to happen. Through his perspective, you get the idea of what it would feel like to be in a city that is just constantly being bombarded by explosions, and you don't even know where on earth they're possibly coming from. So I think this is a good chapter, definitely, this one. All the details, all the setup is here for just the situation that we're sort of going to see by the end of the book. That obviously it sets up. The Earth King is just about here as well. Well, his forces anyway. And just the hope of, like, it's all on Yangchen. Have faith. She will arrive. She will save the day. And the question is obviously going to be, how much does she fully know? Because obviously Kavik, in the message that he has sent, doesn't know about the combustion bending just yet. So, he's obviously alerted her to the best that he can that, okay, something's going on, but, especially if it is through the Jujenta, that's mainly the reason he's contacted her. She just knows she needs to be here because this is what's happening. They'll have to more directly talk to each other to relay that information. And what's that going to be like? Does he come clean immediately or not? Lots of great stuff set up in this chapter. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. Otherwise, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.